Hey y'all. Thanks for watching this video about how Google Trends is awesome now. I would have thought that I would say that. I've spent a lot of time ignoring Google Trends, which is ironic, I suppose. But what I want to talk about today is how it's awesome, and I not secretly, want to talk about two other things, maybe even more than two other things, before I talk about Google Trends. So before I get into it, I'm Justin Dunham. I am one of the founders of Ércule. Ércule works on content systems, high performance, high velocity content systems that includes writing and analytics and SEO and AEO and PMM and lots of different things, mostly for dev tools, data infrastructure, MarTech companies, and also some other SaaS. So what I want to talk about today is Google Trends. But before I do that, I want to hit a couple of other points real quick. And the first one, and I promise these are going to be highly relevant, is what a content system is, because I just mentioned content systems, and I'm going to talk about content systems as we go along. So the idea behind a content system is now that we have, especially now that we have LLMs to help us with all kinds of things, to treat written content as if it were data that we can easily process and change at scale. Now that that exists and we can talk about content systems, we have a challenge that's moved a little bit from, oh my God, we have to write the perfect thing for every single thing we could care about. And we've got like each little piece of content needs to be very carefully curated. That's still true for some content. But we've got this additional thing where we also need to think about our content at scale and going back and updating content and figuring out what's working and what's not and being more rigorous about all those things. So what is a content system? It's the set of people and process and technology that you use to make that whole system work together to drive pipeline or SEO, AEO, or brand or other outcomes that you want. Okay, so what is a content system? And then the next thing I want to talk about is, now that we can do this stuff at scale, we're talking more about how much of the query surface area can you capture. And so the idea there is that what a content system does is it takes your product, your POV, your reason for being as a company, and it takes all of those things and connects them with what your buyers need to learn. And your buyers need to learn a lot. They have a lot of questions about your product specifically, about how it compares to competitors, all that stuff. But they also have questions about, I'm trying to solve a problem. How should I even think about this problem? How can I get the budget for doing this? What are the impacts? What are the challenges I'm going to face when I do this? Why is my homegrown solution not going to work? Or when is it not going to work? And some of these questions are for buyers, not even in their current role, but in a future role for influencers. So I want you to think about this idea of the query surface area, finding all the questions that people might have and prioritizing getting those questions answered. That's part of what a content system does. Okay, I'm going to get to Google Trends in a second, I promise. What is a content system? We talked about that. We talked about the query surface area and its relation to the content system. And then the other thing that I want to talk about is the function of what we call grounding in any of these systems. So when we're deciding what to write about or what to produce, whether it's at scale or whether we're doing something that's more carefully written and is done by a human and is higher quality, regardless of what we're doing, we need some evidence that people are actually asking the questions, and we need to do research to figure out what questions our buyers are actually asking so that we can even answer them. So this is about Google Trends, and it's not about Google Trends. I'm going to talk about Google Trends in a second and give you a really quick tour of how it kind of looks now and some things you can use it for. But I also want you to think about this idea that it's about grounding. And what's exciting about Google Trends now is that it's also a better source of grounding than it has ever been. It's a better source of finding real questions. Some other examples of grounding, and this is the last thing I'll talk about before we switch over to Google Trends, are things that we've always done or that we're starting to do now, like keyword volume. Like that's an example of grounding something and figuring out what people are actually asking about. So if I go to the ércule app and I look for content strategy, here are all the queries that people have about content strategy and all things that we could answer. If I go to content systems, which I'm going to do very selfishly because this is something that we're working on increasing our footprint for and answering more questions for people we can help, you can see questions, queries, people have actual things with volume against them. Is it perfect? Keyword volume is very imperfect, but it is a thing. Another place you can ground the things that you write are in FAQs. So one other thing that we do for clients that you should look into is, what do people actually ask about things that we care about in Reddit? What do they actually ask on LinkedIn? What are they actually asking in the people also ask on Google? What's the research for the prompts and all the things that they have? So I'm done talking about things that are not Google Trends now. And thank you for sticking with me over the last almost 6.5 minutes. But the reason I'm excited about Google Trends is that I want you to think about these things in terms of, we're building a content system and we need a way to ground the things we produce and the actual questions that people have. You can use sales calls, use all kinds of things for this grounding exercise. Okay, so let's take a look at Google Trends. And I don't have like a previous version that I can show you, and maybe somebody, a Google Trends expert, is going to watch this and say, Justin, this stuff has been around here for years, but I think a lot of this is new and it's informed by some of the Gemini things. So let's add this to the stage. So if you don't know what Google Trends is, the idea is you can go here and see country by country. I'm super bummed about that Catherine O'Hara news. That's really sad. She was great. That you're seeing at the bottom. Country by country, topic by topic, whatever it is, you can get a sense of relative search volume over time. What Google Trends does not give you is absolute volume over time. So that is something to be aware of, although you can kind of back into some of those things. And I'll show you how to get there. And man, these are some very, very resonant topics that people are searching for. You can see the trend implications of these right on the front page now. But if I go into my Explorer here, I'm going to put in a topic. So let's say I want to look for, let's do net dollar retention. Let's say you're running a company that, you know, helps people calculate this or improve it or whatever it is, right? Let's just imagine that that's a topic we're clear about. Change your countries can be useful if you're trying to specifically build a presence, for example, in another country. You might want to understand how people talk about a thing in one place versus another. Perhaps even what is the accepted translation of a specific term. But and then you can change your date ranges. Google Trends defaults to the past hour, which for B2B SaaS businesses is very rarely going to be useful. But one of the things that you can look at is maybe just over the past 5 years. Oh, people are starting to talk about it more. Okay, there's something here. Great. And then you can, like I said, compare this to other things. So like, what about, you know, if we compare this, I actually don't know if gross dollar retention is a thing, but I'm going to assume that it is. Oh, if we're going to do one of these, let's do net dollar retention, for example. So this is a way you can kind of back into relative popularity, is both of these are indexed to the same numbers. All right, well, let's get rid of that one. So here's net dollar retention. And then down here, Google's going to tell you top queries in the past 5 years. All right, well, let's do top queries in the past year. The rate, what it is, the formula, the acronym, fine, good. You could take into account whether it's moving up or down, but these are good queries to have. And you can get related queries from anywhere. You can get them from Google's own people also ask, from Google's own interface. You can get them from whatever search analytics and data tool you're using. But this can be a source of additional queries that you might not have otherwise seen. And then the other thing that's over here is rising queries. So there's not a lot here, and we can kind of go in and, you know, do some more exploration of any one of these and understand how it in particular performs. You can see that net dollar retention rate, for whatever reason, is showing some additional volume over the past month. But if I look for some other terms, like, okay, we looked for net dollar retention. Whoops, I got to share my screen again. Let's look at data transformation. Let's do data transformation. So there's that one. And then here's one that has a significantly longer top queries list that's useful. And then here's rising queries. This is kind of interesting. I don't know that this is related to data transformation, but one of the things that data breach news today thing is specifically related to data transformation. But one thing that we can do with some of these workflows, if we're doing LLMs, we're using them to accelerate our content creation process. So we can jump on some of these terms before they become important. And that can be a very important program that you run. So the last thing I will show you here is a nice little suggest search terms button. And again, these are just other sources of the data that we're talking about, data that you might already be getting, but a good way to look into, should I do this versus that? What does this look like over time? And then this is great too. You can see here are the things that people are, they're looking for data mapping, they're looking for data pipelines, they're looking for ELT. And then it's not that easy to parse this at first glance, but you can kind of go down here and see, okay, here's how it looks over time. And this is the one with the most volume. Well, not surprising, ETL, data cleaning. Interesting. And then, data transformation is maybe not the real opportunity here. Maybe it's some of these other things. And that's been really consistent over time. And then you can start to use this to inform some of the other queries, things that you're thinking about. So none of this is amazingly, mind-blowingly brand new on top of some of the tools you might already be using, but it's a really useful additional data source. It gives you context on some of the things that you might already be thinking about in terms of topics. It gives you the ability to maybe see what things are brand new that you might want to jump on and that you can accelerate your content production workflow with an LLM and then rank or show up for those topics. Can give you suggestions of other related things to write about. And all of these things, or most of them, are relatively new in the new version of Trends. And I've been playing around with it, find it pretty useful just to get context on some of these things. So I realized I've had the It's About Grounding banner up there for like the past 3 minutes, but I guess that's not wrong. So that's it for today. I just wanted to show you Google Trends. I wanted to give you some additional information about what's in there and why it might be useful. And I wanted to talk to you about the idea that what you're really looking for with Google Trends or with what you're seeing for searches in your Google Search Console or what salespeople are being asked or what you're seeing in SEMrush for keyword volume or what you're seeing in your query fanouts and your AI tools, all of these things are ways of getting grounding, of making sure that people are actually asking a question before you put the effort into answering it. And now that we're moving into this era of content systems, one of the things that we need to think about is how do we systematically evaluate those opportunities and make sure they can go into a context-enriched, smart, style-appropriate system for generating, human writing, a mix of both, content that answers that question or those questions in your content system. So that's the way I want you to think about it. So thanks for watching. Hit me up if you have any questions, and I will see you next time. Bye.